President Trump just issued an executive order that should shake the federal workforce to its core and enormously help the country. Hello, I'm Steve Forbes, and this is What's Ahead, where you get the insights you need to better navigate these turbulent times. The largest source of power for Democrats, even more than trial lawyers and high-techies, are unions for government workers. The most notorious and destructive of these are those for teachers. President Trump has taken a momentous step that will impact many unionized federal employees and could affect state and local governments around the country. A few days ago, he signed an executive order that ends collective bargaining for most federal employees. That's right, no more deals with unions on pay, benefits, and work rules. Once upon a time, the deal was that if a person worked for the government, he or she would not get a particularly high salary, but would be rewarded with generous benefits and retire with an excellent pension. However, that hasn't been the norm for years. Today, the pay is high, benefits are juicy, and pensions are out of this world. Too often, bureaucrats make far, far more than people doing similar tasks in the private sector. What is sometimes overlooked is the big bastion of unions is not traditional industries like autos, steel, trucking, and railroads. Rather, it is government. Only 5.9% of private sector workers are unionized versus 32.2% for those in the public sector. The rate of unionization in the private sector has been gradually declining since the 1950s. The raw power of government unions to cow politicians, even at the expense of people's health, was displayed during the pandemic. Bosses of the teachers' unions ignored the science and kept schools closed while shaking down the federal and state governments for billions of alleged emergency dollars. American school kids have yet to recover from the educational damage inflicted by these selfish, capricious shutdowns. How did this happen? The idea of government unions was once considered an absurdity, because unlike the private sector, they'd be bargaining with politicians who want their support. Since the money comes from government revenues, there would be little discipline in traditional labor bargaining where unions don't want to bankrupt the employers. Franklin Roosevelt, who as president did more for labor unions than any other president, called the idea of government unions, quote, unthinkable and intolerable, end quote. But in 1962, President John Kennedy issued an executive order allowing federal workers to organize and bargain. The dam broke in Washington and around the country. Worse, in 1978, Congress codified that order in the Civil Service Reform Act. The result in Washington and copycat actions in numerous states has been an explosion of costs, inadequately funded pension plans, and a ready source of cash and other kinds of help for compliant politicians. So how did President Trump start to undo this costly absurdity? That 1978 act didn't apply for agencies involved in national security, and the president has taken an expansive view of this provision. To solidify and expand what the president has done, Senators Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee and Mike Lee of Utah have introduced the Federal Workforce Freedom Act, which would put a stop to collective bargaining between federal agencies and labor unions. Their bill deserves swift enactment, and it'll act as a prod to the 33 states with public sector labor unions. I'm Steve Forbes. Thanks for listening. Do send in your comments and suggestions. I look forward to being with you soon again.